Good morning. Hayom Yom, Chof Gimmel, Menachem Av. So, in the early 1890s, the Rebbe Rashab was learning with his son the second chapter of Tanya. And in the beginning over there, the Alter Rebbe writes that while every single human being has a soul, has a spiritual soul, the Jewish people have a second soul, a godly soul known as the neshama. And he writes that this soul, the neshama, is a chelek elika mimal mamish, which literally means it's a chelek elika mimal. It is a piece of godliness. It is a piece of God above. And then he throws in the word mamish, which people generally translate as literally, which means we're not using figurative language here. It is literally a piece of God. The soul substance, so to speak, is made out of godly substance. But that is not necessarily the correct translation of the word mamish. And the way he translated here is that the word mamish means when something becomes mamashastic, when something takes on tangible form. When your soul becomes a unique consciousness, it becomes a tangible entity and being and existence, which gives you your own consciousness and you're self-aware, whatever. So that is the soul becoming an independent being, taking on tangible form, coming into existence. And the Rebbe Rashab said that generally, those two terms, elika mimal and mamish, are actually contradictory terms, and it's total oxymoron, and you can't apply both those terms to the same entity and the same being, and the same soul. And to explain why, so really it requires a thorough understanding of the difference between the words ruchni and gashmi, the difference between the words spiritual and physical, and to really understand the definition of those words. But I'll give you a very, very brief crash course. So generally, when we use the words ruchnius, when we use the word spiritual, so what that means, what that connotes, is anything that exists, or the way something exists in its loose form, in a fluid form, in an abstract form, in an infinite form. That's what it means to be a spiritual entity. That's what it means to be a ruchnistic entity. The more fluid your existence is, and the less you're in contradiction with other things, because your own existence is not so fluid, that makes you a ruchnistic entity. The more, though, you take on form, and the more defined you become, and you acquire rigid parameters and rigid definitions, that makes you less spiritual. And the more basically stuck you become and rigid you become, that makes you less spiritual. And that's why the least spiritual thing out there is physical reality or physical objects, because there's no greater form of becoming rigid and stuck in what you are than taking on physical, tangible form. Because every physical object around you, it's so defined just by it is what it is, it's not anything else. It's here and not there. It's this and not that. It's so rigid, it's so stuck, it's so linear. And that's why the physical reality is the complete and polar opposite from anything spiritual, and is the least spiritual you get. So he said, because of this, the words chelek elika mimal, which says this is something which comes from the Most High, is the most spiritual entity, is in contradiction to the words mamish, that it's taking on form, it's taking on tangible form. Because by definition, the more form something takes on, the more tangible something becomes, the less spiritual it is. So how can you say that this is the most spiritual thing, but it's taking on tangible form? The less form something has, the less tangible something is, the more spiritual it is. So you would think the highest spiritual things would have the least form, that would be the least tangible. And the Rebbe Rashab said that would generally be true. That the higher you are, the more spiritual you are, you have less form, you're less tangible, you're less rigid in your existence. But he said the soul is the exception. The soul is unique, the soul is special. And that's actually what makes the soul special. That's what makes the Jewish soul godly. That's what makes the soul godlike. That's what makes the soul atzmos-like. That the highest thing, the highest levels which even transcend spirituality, is God himself. And God himself even transcends spirituality. He even transcends the rigid rule that you can't be rigid, or you can't take on tangible form. That itself is a hindrance to, or a rule in spirituality, that it can't take on tangible form. And when you real spirituality, ruchnius within ruchnius, what it means to be a spiritual entity in comparison to other spiritual entities, is that you even get rid of this rule. And that's why Atzmos himself, God himself, the soul itself, is unique, that although it's the highest thing that transcends all of spirituality, it can come down into real tangible form, and it can affect and influence the physical reality, the physical dimension. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.